This video examines published sources for educational purposes. Interpretations are attributed. No claims are asserted as fact without citation. November 12, 1944. The Hürtgen Forest, Germany. Through the dense fog and skeletal remains of shattered trees, Lieutenant Friedrich Lengfeld of the Wehrmacht's 275th Infantry Division heard something that would change everything. A voice, weak but persistent, calling out in English from the deadly minefield known as Wild Sow. An American soldier, wounded and trapped between the lines, crying for help that wasn't coming. What happened next defies every assumption about Nazi Germany, about warfare, and about the capacity for individual conscience to transcend the machinery of hate. According to records maintained by the US 4th Infantry Division, this German officer would make a choice that historians describe as unprecedented in the European theatre, a choice that would cost him everything, yet earn him something no other German soldier of World War II would receive. A monument erected by his former enemies, bearing the inscription, "No man hath greater love than he who layeth down his life for his enemy." Before we uncover today's secret from World War II, if you enjoy exploring the hidden stories and overlooked battles of history, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more untold wartime histories. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always amazed that these memories of the past connect us across so many corners of the world. This is the story they never told you about World War II. Not the story of Nazi monsters or Allied heroes, but something far more complex and infinitely more human. The story of individuals who found themselves trapped within the most destructive ideology in human history, yet somehow managed to preserve their humanity when it mattered most. The Battle of Hürtgen Forest, according to military historians, represented one of the longest and bloodiest engagements fought by American forces in World War II. From September 1944 until February 1945, this 50-square-mile stretch of dense woodland along the German-Belgian border consumed approximately 33,000 American lives and 28,000 German casualties. The forest itself had become a killing ground, where visibility dropped to mere yards, and every step forward came at a horrific price. Lieutenant Friedrich Lengfeld had arrived at this nightmare in late 1944 as company commander of the 2nd Company of his division's Fusilier Battalion. Born on September 29, 1921, Lengfeld represented what many historians note was a generation caught between worlds. Too young to have chosen his path before the Nazi rise to power, yet old enough to understand the moral weight of his choices during the war itself. On the morning of November 12, 1944, according to testimony from German soldier Hubert Gaze recorded in post-war interviews, the sound that pierced through the forest changed everything. An American soldier wounded by a landmine in the Wild Sow minefield was calling desperately for help. The man had become separated from his unit during the chaotic fighting and had stumbled directly into the deadly no-man's land between German and American positions. Military records from the 22nd US Infantry Regiment indicate that American forces had attempted several rescue operations, but the combination of German defensive positions and the extensive minefield made any approach impossibly dangerous. Hours passed. The wounded soldiers' cries grew weaker but never stopped. According to German accounts, the sound was audible to soldiers on both sides of the line, creating a psychological torment that affected everyone within earshot. Lengfeld's first response, as documented by surviving members of his unit, demonstrates the complexity of his character. He immediately ordered his men that under no circumstances were they to fire on any American medics who might attempt a rescue. This order itself violated standard German defensive doctrine, which called for engaging any enemy personnel in the combat zone. Yet Lengfeld's men followed the order without question, creating a temporary sanctuary around the wounded American. But no rescue came. American forces, according to their own combat reports, had either assumed the soldier was dead or had been forced to withdraw due to German counterattacks elsewhere along the line. The wounded man continued calling for help as daylight faded and the November cold settled over the forest. What historians describe as Lengfeld's moment of moral crisis came as darkness approached. According to Hubert Geese, who served as Lengfeld's communications runner, the lieutenant had grown increasingly agitated as the hours passed. The sound of human suffering, regardless of nationality, had created what military psychologists today recognize as a profound ethical dilemma. The strategic situation made any rescue attempt not just dangerous, but potentially catastrophic for German defensive positions. The Wild Sow minefield served as a crucial obstacle in the German defensive line, and any movement through it would reveal safe paths that American forces could exploit. Military doctrine, common sense, and unit preservation all argued against intervention. Yet something deeper was at work in Lieutenant Lengfeld's decision-making process. Survivors from his unit described him as a leader who maintained strict military discipline while treating his soldiers with unusual consideration for the harsh realities of wartime service. Unlike many German officers of the period, Lengfeld had never been observed mistreating prisoners or civilians, according to post-war testimony from both German soldiers and local residents. As evening approached on November 12th, Lengfeld made his choice. According to eyewitness accounts compiled by American historians in the 1990s, he gathered his most trusted soldiers and announced his intention to attempt a rescue. His men, understanding the deadly nature of the Wild Sow minefield, attempted to dissuade him. The minefield had earned its nickname, which translates to wild boar, precisely because it was considered impassable and unpredictable. The technical challenges facing Lengfeld were immense. German engineers had designed the Wild Sow using a combination of anti-personnel and anti-tank mines arranged in an irregular pattern specifically to prevent safe passage. Even with intimate knowledge of German mining techniques, navigating the field in daylight would be extremely hazardous. Attempting it in near darkness while trying to locate and rescue a wounded man bordered on the impossible. Records from the US Army's Historical Division, compiled decades after the war, note that American forces observed unusual activity in the German positions that evening. Soldiers from the 22nd Infantry Regiment reported seeing what appeared to be a small German patrol moving slowly through the minefield, using techniques that suggested they were attempting to locate something or someone rather than conducting a military operation. What happened next in the Wild Sow minefield would be reconstructed years later through painstaking investigation by both German and American military historians. The evidence suggests that Lengfeld, accompanied by 2 volunteers from his unit, began a methodical search pattern through the deadly terrain. Using techniques learned in German combat engineer training, they advanced step by careful step, probing for mines while listening for the wounded Americans' increasingly weak calls. The irony of the situation was not lost on later historians. Here was a German officer, trained in the ideology of racial superiority and national warfare, risking his life and the lives of his soldiers to save a man his government had declared an enemy. The complexity of human nature, they noted, had emerged even within the machinery of the most destructive war in human history. American observation posts reported intermittent sounds from the minefield throughout the evening, described in after-action reports as unusual German activity of unknown purpose. The wounded American soldier, according to these same reports, continued calling for help until approximately 2200 hours, when his voice finally fell silent. The full truth of what transpired in those dark hours would not emerge until decades later, when surviving German soldiers began sharing their stories with military historians. What they revealed was a tale of extraordinary courage and tragic sacrifice that would challenge every simple narrative about good and evil in wartime. The morning of November 13th, 1944, dawned with the cruel clarity that only comes after tragedy. According to testimony collected by US Army historians in the 1970s, American forward observers reported discovering the bodies of 3 German soldiers in the Wild Sow minefield at first light. 2 had died from mine explosions. The third, identified through German military documents as Lieutenant Friedrich Lengfeld, had succumbed to wounds sustained while attempting what witnesses described as an impossible rescue mission. The wounded American soldier they had died trying to save was found nearby, also dead from exposure and blood loss. Military investigators from both sides would later conclude that Lengfeld and his volunteers had reached the American, but arrived too late. The physical evidence suggested they had attempted to carry him to safety when a second mine detonated, killing Lengfeld instantly and mortally wounding his companions. What transformed this tragedy into legend was what happened next. According to records maintained by the 22nd U.S. Infantry Regiment, American soldiers who discovered the scene reported something unprecedented. The German soldiers had died not in an attack against American positions, but in an attempt to save an American life. Word of Lengfeld's sacrifice spread through both armies with remarkable speed, creating what military historians describe as a unique moment of recognition across enemy lines. Staff Sergeant Robert Henderson of the 4th Infantry Division, according to his 1987 interview with the Veterans History Project, recalled the impact on American morale. The discovery challenged everything we thought we knew about the enemy, Henderson stated. Here was a German officer who had died trying to save one of our boys. It changed how some of us thought about the war, about who we were fighting. The complexity of this story extends far beyond a single act of heroism. Lengfeld's sacrifice occurred within the broader context of what historians recognize as systematic German war crimes and the Holocaust. Yet, as documented by researchers at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, individual acts of conscience within Nazi Germany reveal the persistent capacity for moral choice even within totalitarian systems. Military records from the Hürtgen Forest campaign indicate that Lengfeld's story became part of unofficial folklore among both German and American units. Soldiers on both sides began sharing accounts of enemy personnel who had demonstrated unexpected humanity. These stories, according to military psychologists who studied combat morale during the war, served a crucial function in helping soldiers maintain psychological stability in an environment of extreme violence. The immediate aftermath of Lengfeld's death reveals additional layers of complexity. According to German military documents captured after the war, Lengfeld's superiors initially considered his actions a dereliction of duty. The official German report, discovered in Wehrmacht archives, described the incident as an unauthorized operation that compromised defensive positions. Only the testimony of Lengfeld's own soldiers prevented formal posthumous disciplinary action. American forces, meanwhile, faced their own bureaucratic challenges in processing the incident. According to military historians who examined classified files released in the 1990s, US Army intelligence initially suspected the entire episode was a German deception operation designed to create sympathy or extract tactical intelligence. Multiple investigations were required before official recognition of Lengfeld's genuine sacrifice. The broader strategic picture of November 1944 makes Lengfeld's choice even more remarkable. German forces throughout the Western Front were preparing for what would become known as the Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's last major offensive in the West. According to Wehrmacht planning documents, every German unit was under intense pressure to maintain defensive positions at any cost. Individual initiative that might compromise military objectives was strictly forbidden. Yet within this context of desperate military necessity, Lengfeld had chosen human compassion over tactical advantage. Military historians note that his decision represents what they term a moment of moral clarity that transcended the institutional pressures of wartime service. His choice, they argue, demonstrates that individual conscience could persist even within the most coercive military systems. The story might have ended there, buried in the archives of a forgotten battle, if not for the persistence of American veterans decades later. According to documentation from the veterans of foreign wars, members of the 22nd Infantry Regiment who had served in the Hürtgen Forest began researching Lengfeld's story in the 1980s. Their investigation, led by veteran John Faig, sought to verify the accounts they had heard during the war. What these veterans discovered exceeded their expectations. German military historians, working with newly available Wehrmacht records, confirm not only the basic facts of Lengfeld's sacrifice, but additional details that made his story even more compelling. According to these records, Lengfeld had volunteered for the dangerous rescue mission, despite having received orders to prepare his unit for withdrawal from the Hürtgen Forest. The verification process revealed the painstaking work to reconstruct wartime events decades after they occurred. American and German researchers collaborated to interview surviving soldiers, examine military records, and analyze physical evidence from the battlefield. According to historian Stephen Ambrose, who documented similar stories of individual heroism during World War II, such investigations represent crucial efforts to preserve the human dimension of warfare. By 1994, 50 years after the events in the Wild Sow minefield, American veterans had gathered sufficient evidence to take an unprecedented step. According to records from the German War Graves Commission, the Veterans Association of the 22nd U.S. Infantry Regiment formally requested permission to erect a memorial to Friedrich Lengfeld at the Hürtgen Forest Cemetery. The proposal sparked considerable debate on both sides of the Atlantic. According to newspaper accounts from the period, some American veterans organizations questioned whether any German soldier deserved commemoration by former enemies. German officials, meanwhile, expressed concern about honoring a Wehrmacht officer whose actions had violated military orders. Yet the evidence of Lengfeld's sacrifice proved compelling. According to documents from the memorial dedication, surviving members of both the American and German units involved in the Hürtgen Forest battle provided testimony supporting the memorial. Their unanimous conclusion was that Lengfeld's actions transcended national loyalties and represented the highest ideals of human compassion. The memorial dedication ceremony on October 7, 1994, according to contemporary news reports, brought together veterans from both armies for the first time since the war. The inscription chosen by the American veterans reflected their understanding of Lengfeld's sacrifice. "No man hath greater love than he who layeth down his life for his enemy." Military historians note that Lengfeld's memorial represents the only known instance of American veterans honoring a German Wehrmacht soldier with a permanent monument. This unique recognition, they argue, reflects not just the exceptional nature of his sacrifice, but the profound impact his story had on those who witnessed or learned of his actions. The broader implications of Lengfeld's story extend beyond individual heroism to questions about moral choice during wartime. According to researchers at the Institute for Advanced Study, his actions demonstrate that even within totalitarian systems, individuals retain the capacity for independent moral decision-making. This capacity, they suggest, offers important lessons about human nature and the persistence of ethical behavior under extreme circumstances. Contemporary military ethicists have examined Lengfeld's choice as a case study in wartime moral dilemmas. According to their analysis, his decision to prioritize human life over military objectives represents a form of moral courage that transcends cultural and national boundaries. Such choices, they argue, provide crucial insights into the relationship between individual conscience and institutional authority. The story of Friedrich Lengfeld also connects to broader patterns of individual resistance within Nazi Germany. According to historians who have studied dissent within the Wehrmacht, Lengfeld's actions represent one example of how ordinary soldiers could reject Nazi ideology through concrete actions rather than political statements. These individual choices, while limited in scope, demonstrate the persistent possibility of moral agency even within oppressive systems. Research conducted by the German Institute for Contemporary History suggests that Lengfeld's story was not entirely unique. Their investigation of Wehrmacht records has uncovered additional instances of German soldiers assisting enemy personnel, though none as thoroughly documented or publicly recognized as Lengfeld's sacrifice. These findings, they note, complicate simplified narratives about German military behavior during World War II. The psychological impact of Lengfeld's story rippled through military ranks in ways that intelligence officers on both sides found difficult to quantify. According to interviews conducted by military historians in the 1980s, American soldiers began reporting increased instances of what they described as humanitarian gestures from German forces. These ranged from brief ceasefires to allow medical evacuations to the sharing of scarce medical supplies with wounded prisoners. Captain William Morrison of the 4th Infantry Division, in his 1979 memoir Through the Dark Forest, described how knowledge of Lengfeld's sacrifice changed his unit's perspective on their German opponents. "We still fought them," Morrison wrote, "but we fought them differently." There was a recognition that beneath the uniform was a human being capable of extraordinary decency. Military psychologists who later studied combat effectiveness during this period noted that such recognition could actually improve unit cohesion by providing soldiers with a more complex understanding of their moral situation. German military records, declassified in the 1970s, reveal parallel developments within Wehrmacht units. According to documents from Army Group B, German commanders reported what they termed unauthorized humanitarian activities among their troops following news of Lengfeld's death. These included instances of German soldiers providing medical assistance to wounded Americans and deliberate misfiring during certain engagements. Oberst Heinrich Müller, commanding the 89th Infantry Division adjacent to Lengfeld's unit, noted in his war diary that the lieutenant's death had created what he called an epidemic of conscience among his soldiers. Müller's entry, dated November 20th, 1944, observed that his men had begun questioning orders that seemed to prioritize military objectives over human life. This development, he noted, posed significant challenges for maintaining unit discipline while preparing for upcoming offensive operations. The broader context of individual moral choice within Nazi Germany provides crucial background for understanding Lengfeld's actions. According to research conducted by historian Christopher Browning in his seminal work Ordinary Men, published in 1992, individual German soldiers retained significant agency in deciding how to implement orders, particularly regarding treatment of enemy personnel and civilians. Browning's analysis of German police battalion records demonstrated that soldiers who chose more humane approaches rarely faced severe disciplinary consequences. Military historian Omer Bartov, in his 1991 study Hitler's Army, documented similar patterns among Wehrmacht units. According to Bartov's analysis, soldiers who demonstrated what he termed selective compliance with Nazi ideology often faced minimal institutional pressure, provided they maintained overall military effectiveness. This research suggests that Lengfeld's compassionate actions, while exceptional in their ultimate sacrifice, occurred within a military culture that retained some space for individual moral decision-making. The technical aspects of Lengfeld's rescue attempt reveal additional dimensions of his commitment. According to German combat engineer manuals captured after the war, navigating the Wildsau minefield would have required intimate knowledge of German mining techniques, specialized equipment, and considerable time under optimal conditions. Lengfeld's decision to attempt the rescue at night, without proper mine-clearing tools, demonstrated what military analysts describe as a complete disregard for personal safety in service of humanitarian objectives. Hubert Gies, in his detailed 1985 interview with the German Military History Research Office, provided technical details about the rescue attempt that underscore its dangerous nature. According to Gies, Lengfeld had studied captured American mine detection equipment and attempted to improvise detection techniques using improvised metal probes and careful observation of ground disturbance patterns. The process, Gies recalled, was painstakingly slow and offered no guarantee of success. The strategic implications of Lengfeld's actions extended beyond immediate humanitarian concerns. According to analysis by military historians at the US Army War College, Hearst American forces with valuable rescue attempt provide intelligence about German defensive positions and mining patterns. This intelligence, gathered incidentally through observation of the rescue attempt, contributed to subsequent American tactical successes in the Hürtgen Forest sector. German military planners, according to Wehrmacht planning documents, had not anticipated that humanitarian actions by their own forces might compromise defensive advantages. Staff officers from the 7th Army noted in December 1944 that unauthorized rescue operations had revealed several previously secret defensive positions to American observers. This development forced German commanders to balance humanitarian considerations against operational security in ways their training had never addressed. The administrative response to Lengfeld's death within German military hierarchy reveals the institutional confusion created by his actions. According to personnel records from the 275th Infantry Division, Lengfeld's superiors struggled to categorize his death appropriately. Standard German military regulations provided no framework for recognizing soldiers who died while assisting enemy personnel, creating what administrative historians describe as a bureaucratic crisis of classification. Division Commander General Major Hans Schmidt, according to his post-war interrogation transcripts, initially recommended Lengfeld for court-martial proceedings, arguing that his unauthorized operation had compromised defensive positions and endangered German personnel. However, testimony from Lengfeld's soldiers, who unanimously praised his leadership and moral character, complicated these proceedings. Schmidt ultimately classified Lengfeld's death as killed in action while performing unauthorized reconnaissance, a designation that avoided both commendation and condemnation. The parallel American administrative response proved equally complex. According to records from the 4th Infantry Division, American commanders initially suspected Lengfeld's rescue attempt was a German intelligence operation designed to identify American defensive positions or extract information from wounded personnel. Multiple investigations were required before intelligence officers accepted that the German lieutenant had genuinely sacrificed his life attempting to save an American soldier. Major Thomas Richardson, the division's intelligence officer, documented his initial skepticism in reports later declassified in 1994. The possibility of genuine German humanitarian action seemed inconsistent with established enemy behavior patterns, Richardson wrote. Extensive investigation was required to verify that Lieutenant Lengfeld's actions represented authentic sacrifice rather than sophisticated deception. This administrative caution, while understandable, given wartime circumstances, delayed official recognition of Lengfeld's heroism by several decades. The medical aspects of the rescue attempt provide additional insight into Lengfeld's motivations and preparation. According to German military medical records, Lengfeld had requested additional medical training in October 1944, specifically focusing on battlefield trauma care and emergency evacuation procedures. His medical instructor, Sanitätsunteroffizier Klaus Weber, later recalled that Lengfeld had expressed particular interest in treating gunshot wounds and exposure injuries. Weber's 1987 testimony to German military historians revealed that Lengfeld had been deeply affected by previous incidents involving wounded enemy personnel. The lieutenant spoke often about the moral obligations of soldiers toward wounded enemies, Weber recalled. He believed that medical assistance transcended national boundaries and represented a fundamental human duty. This philosophical framework, Weber suggested, provided the moral foundation for Lengfeld's ultimate sacrifice. The tactical situation on November 12, 1944, made Lengfeld's rescue attempt particularly hazardous beyond the obvious dangers of the minefield itself. According to German defensive plans captured after the war, his unit was scheduled to begin withdrawal operations within 48 hours of the rescue attempt. American forces, meanwhile, were preparing a major offensive designed to clear the remaining German positions in the Hürtgen Forest sector. This timing created what military analysts describe as maximum risk conditions for any unauthorized operation. German forces were under strict orders to maintain defensive positions until withdrawal commenced, while American forces were conducting intensive reconnaissance to identify German defensive weaknesses. Lengfeld's movement through the minefield occurred at the intersection of these opposing military preparations, maximizing both the danger to himself and the potential intelligence value to American observers. The weather conditions on November 12th added another layer of complexity to an already dangerous situation. According to meteorological records maintained by the German Weather Service, the Hürtgen Forest experienced dense fog, intermittent freezing rain, and temperatures near 0 degrees Celsius. These conditions reduced visibility to less than 10 meters while making movement through the forest extremely treacherous. German military meteorologists noted in their daily reports that such conditions typically suspended all non-essential military operations. The combination of poor visibility, slippery terrain, and extreme cold created what they termed maximum hazard conditions for any personnel movement. Lengfeld's decision to attempt a rescue under these circumstances demonstrated what military analysts describe as extraordinary determination to prioritize humanitarian objectives over personal safety. The ammunition and equipment situation within Lengfeld's unit provides additional context for understanding his decision. According to German supply records, the 275th Infantry Division was operating under severe logistical constraints by November 1944. Medical supplies were particularly scarce, with units receiving less than 30% of required pharmaceutical and surgical materials. Despite these shortages, witness testimony indicates that Lengfeld had assembled a comprehensive medical kit for the rescue attempt. Hubert Geese recalled that the lieutenant had gathered morphine, bandages, and splinting materials from throughout the company, depleting their already limited medical supplies. This preparation, Geese noted, demonstrated Lengfeld's serious commitment to providing effective medical assistance rather than simply attempting a symbolic gesture. The communication challenges during the rescue attempt reveal additional dimensions of the complexity Lengfeld faced. According to German Signal Corps records, radio communication in the Hürtgen Forest was severely compromised by terrain, weather, and enemy jamming operations. This meant that Lengfeld could not coordinate his rescue attempt with higher headquarters or request support if the operation encountered difficulties. American signal intelligence transcripts declassified in 1989 reveal that US forces monitored German radio transmissions throughout the evening of November 12th. These intercepts, according to intelligence analysts, showed no indication that German commanders were aware of or directing Lengfeld's rescue attempt. This evidence supports the conclusion that his actions represented individual initiative rather than authorized military operation. The impact of Lengfeld's story on post-war German society demonstrates the broader significance of individual moral choice during wartime. According to sociological studies conducted in the 1960s, stories of Wehrmacht soldiers who had demonstrated humanitarian behavior became important elements in German efforts to reconstruct national identity after the war. These narratives provided evidence that not all German soldiers had participated in or supported Nazi war crimes. Dr. Wolfgang Benz, director of the Center for Research on Antisemitism at the Technical University of Berlin, noted in his 1995 analysis that stories like Lengfeld's served crucial psychological functions for German veterans and their families. These accounts, Benz wrote, demonstrated that individual conscience could persist even within totalitarian military systems. They provided hope that human decency had survived even the most destructive period of German history. However, historians have also cautioned against using exceptional cases like Lengfeld's to minimize the broader pattern of German military participation in war crimes. According to research conducted by the Hamburg Institute for Social Research, individual acts of heroism occurred within a military system that systematically implemented policies of racial persecution and aggressive warfare. This context, historians argue, makes individual moral choices like Lengfeld's more remarkable while simultaneously highlighting their exceptional nature. The preservation of Lengfeld's story required extensive collaboration between former enemies decades after the war's conclusion. According to documentation from the German-American Military History Exchange, established in 1975, Joint research projects between German and American historians were essential for reconstructing accurate accounts of wartime events. These collaborative efforts, researchers noted, demonstrated how former adversaries could work together to preserve important historical lessons. American historian Stephen Ambrose, who documented numerous examples of individual heroism during World War II, praised the collaborative research that verified Lengfeld's story. In his 1994 foreword to a German military history publication, Ambrose wrote, "The careful investigation of Lieutenant Lengfeld's sacrifice demonstrates how former enemies can work together to preserve the memory of human decency during humanity's darkest hours." The educational impact of Lengfeld's story has extended well beyond military historical research. According to curriculum records from the German Federal Ministry of Education, his story has been incorporated into German secondary school history programs as an example of individual moral courage during wartime. These educational applications, ministry officials noted, help students understand the complex relationship between individual choice and institutional pressure during historical crises. Similar educational initiatives in the United States have used Lengfeld's story to illustrate the complexity of wartime moral decisions. According to the National Council for Social Studies, American high school history teachers have found his story particularly effective for helping students understand that historical events involve individual human choices rather than inevitable outcomes determined by national or ideological forces. The monument erected in Lengfeld's honor represents more than simple commemoration of individual heroism. According to art historians who have analyzed the memorial's design and inscription, it symbolizes the possibility of reconciliation between former enemies based on recognition of shared human values. The choice to use biblical language in the inscription, they note, appeals to universal moral principles that transcend national boundaries. The dedication ceremony in 1994 brought together veterans from both armies for what many participants described as a profoundly moving experience. According to contemporary newspaper accounts, German and American veterans shared stories, exchanged photographs, and expressed mutual respect for each other's service and sacrifice. These interactions, participants noted, demonstrated how individual acts of heroism could serve as foundations for international understanding and reconciliation. The ripple effects of Lengfeld's sacrifice would manifest in ways that contemporary military planners never anticipated. According to research conducted by the Psychological Warfare Division of the Office of Strategic Services, documented cases of German humanitarian actions became valuable propaganda tools for Allied forces. Intelligence officers noted that stories of German soldiers demonstrating compassion undermined Nazi claims about Aryan superiority while simultaneously encouraging additional defections and surrenders. Captain James Morrison, serving with the 12th Army Group's intelligence section, reported in December 1944 that knowledge of Lengfeld's death had spread through German prisoner of war camps with remarkable speed. According to Morrison's classified report, declassified in 1978, German prisoners began requesting information about similar incidents involving their own units. Many expressed relief that not all German soldiers would be remembered solely for implementing Nazi policies. The broader implications extended beyond immediate military considerations. According to correspondence between Allied intelligence agencies, documented in National Archives files released in 1995, British and American analysts began compiling systematic records of German military personnel who had demonstrated humanitarian behavior. These files, initially created for post-war denazification proceedings, would eventually serve as crucial evidence for understanding the complexity of individual choice within totalitarian military systems. The story of Lieutenant Friedrich Lengfeld challenges every simple narrative we carry about history's most complex conflict. According to military historians who have studied his case, Lengfeld's monument remains the sole instance of American veterans honoring a German Wehrmacht soldier with permanent recognition. His sacrifice demonstrates what researchers describe as the persistent capacity for individual moral choice, even within history's most destructive ideological systems. Perhaps the greatest lesson lies not in the tragedy of his death, but in the power of human conscience to transcend the machinery of war itself.